So today's talk is about the three poisons. So these are kind of interesting. When the Buddha first taught about the three poisons, he taught them as something to avoid and or not hold on to, because if we did, we would not only suffer, but we wouldn't experience our life. We wouldn't actually have the pleasure of being a human being. We'd be caught up in this poison. However, after a while, in the Buddhist teaching, he taught that the poisons can be our teachers. And this is not how we normally relate to what he calls the three poisons. And you'll see different translations. Sometimes they're listed as craving, aversion, and ignorance. So pretty broad, craving, aversion, or ignorance. Another way you could say it is ignorance could be just denial. That's kind of a modern expression. We're basically ignoring what's actually happening. Or another way of imagining ignorance or seeing it is, I have a view, all left-handed people are bad speakers. Like, I have this idea, all left-handed people are bad speakers. I have that idea and I hold on to it. So I meet a left-handed person who's a brilliant speaker, and I ignore that possibility because I have this idea. So that's another way that ignorance functions. Aversion is every scale of aversion. So it can be something quite subtle, just like normal irritability. Every garden variety irritability is basically aversion. And then there can also be like a repulsion. It can have degrees, but that's still aversion. And then craving, that's pretty easy. Wanting, holding on to something, wishing things were a different way. So to use these as teachers, don't throw them away and don't avoid them. Normally, your average Joe or average Jill, if they feel aversion, they act out. If they feel craving, they act it out. Or they push it away. That's the average Joe or Jill. That's what all of us are inclined to do. Yours truly as well. So we don't want things to be the way they are. And that's the basic thing we are averse to, the way things are. Yesterday on Zoom, there was this extraordinary example of it. Dharma Zen Center has a Saturday Zoom, and I was doing it from my home. And the browser hadn't been rebooted in 6 months or so. And so my Zoom was turning off and having me exit the meeting about every 4 or 5 minutes. And then it would cycle around and reconnect me. And Bernie, my husband's working for the LA Phil, and he's also using the same browser. And his computer is going out every 5 minutes, and he's talking to customers on the phone, and he has no computer. So he comes to me about halfway through the Zoom class going, are you losing the internet? I said, yes, but it keeps coming back. He says, yeah, we'll just have to reboot the browser when your class is over. Good, got it. So I'm giving a talk much like this one, and the whole thing ends for me. Everybody else is staying in the meeting. And then I would reappear. Now, I didn't like this. Why? Because I have a desire to give a talk. I have a desire to be coherent, to make the point, yeah? So that desire is appearing, and also this aversion every time. because my screen would freeze up and then boink, everybody gone. Not a thing I could do about it. So I just kept accepting it as it was. And the good news is that wasn't too hard to do, and I didn't lose my sense of humor. And the 10 or 7 or 8 people that were on the call also did not lose their sense of humor. It wasn't lost on them that we were talking about the same point, aversion to how things are. And here we were in the middle of something none of us liked how it was, but we were all just welcoming it in. So I was pointing out 2 ways of reacting, either acting out or pushing away. The third choice is to stay with the feeling when it appears. Whether aversion appears, or craving appears, or ignorance appears, stay. Open up to it. Open up to it with your heart and your mind. And just stay with it, with no agenda for it to go away, and with no story. All of us, myself included, instantly make a narrative, instantly make a story. Things are this way because blah, 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 blah. I want this because blah, 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 blah. I don't think this is the case because of blah, 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 blah. Those narratives immediately come to mind. Don't follow them. Just in the same way as earlier, you're all sitting in silence and some thinking appeared, and you noticed it, maybe you labeled it, maybe you thought it for a minute, then you returned. You stopped following the thought. And then moments later, that repeats itself, That's typical in meditation. Maybe somebody had a very busy mind today. Maybe somebody had a still mind. Maybe somebody was chewing on a problem. But even so, you would keep returning to the breath. You'd be returning to your direct experience. So when aversion or craving or ignorance appear, that's what we do. We just stay with it. When we do this, that heart is going to be tender. It's going to be a little kind of sore. And it's going to have a tinge of sadness. That sadness is not personal. That is sadness for the way this world is. And our willingness to just stay with that tender heart helps. That's the conditioned part of our bodhi nature, bodhicitta. The unconditioned part is unknowable. So that is a mystery. The mystery is fully present, but what we experience is tenderness and some sadness. We have this morning bell chant in my tradition, and 2 or 3 times in the chant we say, "Great love, great sadness, Buddha." Some translations are, "Great love, great compassion, Buddha." When you just lean in to craving, or lean in to aversion, or lean into ignorance, you are being great love, great compassion, Buddha. You're not fixing anything. You're just staying with it, and you're experiencing it without making the aversion. Just trusting that process gets very interesting. What begins to happen is these become seeds. Aversion, I just spaced it. Craving, thank you, and ignorance. These become seeds for making friends with ourselves. We cannot extend compassion to any other person until we are kind to ourselves. Our kindness to ourselves is in direct proportion to our ability to be compassionate for others. And the depth of that compassion, the insight, the layers, the nuances, all of that is related to the depth of our kindness for ourselves and the nuances. Now, welcome in the mess. Your wealth is also your neuroses. Your neuroses and your wealth, it's all the same. So this is, ultimately, these opposites coexist. And they coexist in all of us, and they coexist in the world. And we have no choice. So there's no escape, and there's no problem. He said, can any of us escape the war in Ukraine? Luckily, we're not being bombed, but we can escape knowing about that tragedy. Can any of us escape institutionalized racism in this country? No. We can't escape the 400 years it took to develop and grow and soak into all of our culture and our institutions. We can't escape it. It's here. It's the way things are. That's also no problem. And remarkably, it's no big deal. When we can stay with this heart, a lightness begins to appear. A light, like light as in lightweight. Because we don't have to carry around this thing we perceive, the war in Ukraine, the institutionalized racism, the injustices in the health system, our friend who has betrayed us, our husband who has done something wrong or not paid the bills. All of that becomes lighter when we just stay with the aversion, stay with the craving, without any agenda to change it. It changes, and its empty nature becomes clear. It also loses its strength. If something comes along that I have a great aversion to, and I push it away, my heart mind pushes it away, all that energy goes into the thing I have an aversion to. Now the aversion's even stronger. And all of this is happening here. It's my world. It's my world. I've made the whole world in my head. Each of us makes our own world. And that's the problem, and it's also the solution. If we own, oh, I'm making this whole thing, if we see into that, then we see into, oh, I don't have to make it. It's very similar to the first two noble truths. Life is suffering, and we make it suffer. We make that suffering. Then the third noble truth, oh, since we make it, we can unmake it. And then, oh, to sort that out, here's the Eightfold Path. So this is a kind of reduction of that teaching. Here is aversion. I'm making aversion. So if I just stay with it, I see into the heart. And it's a little tender, it's a little sad, and if we just stay there, this aversion just passes. And the same thing can happen with craving. Some craving appears. We want something, even something good. If that craving is driving the car, we are not acting skillfully and able to help this world. So freedom from craving, freedom from aversion, freedom from ignorance means attaining it. what we typically do is blame the outside world. Like, I'm over here, the Ukraine war is over there. But that's a diluted view. That's actually attaching to this illusory world. This illusory world, it's real, but it's constantly changing, and our perception is never of the whole. Our perception is always limited. All we have to do is relax, and it's possible. When we relax, if we're willing to open our heart, now it's not easy. It's not particularly easy, but it is a habit we can cultivate. And we start with the small stuff, you know, like the Zoom program, going out, coming back, going out, coming back. We start with the small stuff and then move up to the bigger stuff. And use aversion to look deeply into what we're feeling. Use craving to look deeply into what we're feeling. Use ignorance to look deeply into what we're feeling. Then we become the person in the Heart Sutra, Avalokiteshvara. Yeah, her name, his name, it's a multifaceted deity, but one translation is the one who looks deeply. Another translation of that name is the one who hears the cries of the world. Those are kind of the same thing. We look into the world deeply. That means we look into our own hearts deeply. And by looking deeply and staying with what we see, not pushing it away and not acting out, just staying without any agenda, everything softens. What we're typically doing is we're building some kind of armor. This is too painful, go away. I want that and I can't get it, go away. And we build this armor around ourselves, and life becomes more and more dead. Because between us and our life is all this armor. Now, if we dismantle that a little bit, we're going to feel it. Then we become tender. And that's a little unpleasant, yeah? It is unpleasant. However, the more we can become tender, the more joy and direct experience appears. So then suddenly, you know, just a well-trimmed lawn looks incredibly beautiful. Or, you know, just down the street, the relationship between the tree and the sidewalk. Or we see this tree and we go, that's really funny, people call this a tree. And it's this insanely beautiful, complicated thing. T-R-E-E comes nowhere near it. We're suddenly intimate, moment by moment by moment. Because our senses aren't covered with aversion, they aren't covered with fear, they aren't covered with craving, they aren't covered with ignorance. You know, ignorance would be my idea of the tree. You know, ignorance would be, oh, that's a gum tree, and it looks like the leaves are really brown because we've had such a drought this year, and how long were they green, and they haven't even fallen yet, and there's no color. That's ignorance. That's this whole story about the poor tree. Here's this tree. It's magnificent, right? This amazing bark, this beautiful light filtering through. Yeah, the leaves are brown. That's just the natural result of the drought. I'm not having that experience if I'm following that narrative. But our practice is, oh, just, wow. Just let it in. And smell the air at the same time. And feel this body. Our life is not guaranteed. Bernie got out of the bed Saturday morning. He was dizzy. He said, I don't know what's going on. I'm like dizzy. But he had to go to work, so he goes to work, right? He's dizzy all day. He's sitting in his chair going, every time I get up, I'm dizzy. I feel I'm going to fall over. Okay, let's go to the ER. Oh, we go to the nearby ER. They're friendly. They take his blood, do an EKG. Oh, the waiting room's crowded because of COVID. Wait out here in the parking lot. So now we have a shady spot behind a column in the parking lot. 1 hour goes by, 2 hours go by. As long as he's sitting, he's okay. He's trying. I say, so what it's like? So it's like walking on a waterbed. It's like I can't really keep my balance. Oh, okay. So then I go into the fast track nurse. So any chance he'll be able to see a doctor soon? Well, there's about 15 people in front of you. The hospital is full. There's no more beds available. So if he needs a bed, he's not going to get one here. And the fast track is just looking at small things like broken fingers and stuff like that, fever. Your guy, the doctor won't even look at his blood work for another maybe 2 or 3 hours. And the sun is setting, it's getting chilly in the parking lot. So I say to Bern, so what do you want to do? And we have this friend, Rivki, who's a nurse. She lives in Florida. He goes, let's just go home and call Rivki, see what she says. So I go in and I tell the triage nurse, now this was a little subtle. I said, William Keating is not going to wait. We're just going to go because it's all so busy here. And the triage nurse looked at me and she said, well, I cannot make you stay. And her face was really calm. And I thought, she has read the EKG. She has seen the results of the blood work. He's not having a heart attack. He's not having a stroke, or it would be on her face and they would have bumped him to the front of the line. So since she's being very calm, I just trusted her. I thought, she's calm, so whatever she knows, because she's not allowed to read the chart and tell me. She's not a doctor. But she's not being hysterical when I tell her, patient Keating, I'm going to take him home, right? So we call Rivki, and Rivki kind of gives us an overview. And Bernie just gets used to the symptoms, right? Not so bad. And he's just really careful walking around, and he'll see the doctor on Monday, because his office is closed Saturday and Sunday. Our lives aren't guaranteed. So, of course, I have aversion appearing, desire appearing. So, this is how it is. We just stay. We just stay. How are you, Bernie? You want a cup of water? You want to stay in the shade? You okay? Yeah, I'm okay, as long as I'm still okay, good. And we're both just kind of dozing off in the chairs in the parking lot, watching the light change. But no narrative. I mean, I can't speak for Bernie. He's fairly practical. I can't speak for what he was going through, but for me, I just kept saying, you don't need to make up a story. You don't need to go to what you think this is. Don't go there. You're not a doctor. It doesn't matter what you think. It only matters what they think. It's like that. That's just practice. What is this? This is sitting in the parking lot, looking for a shady spot, Checking my watch. Oh, the sun will go down at 6:15. That'll cool things off. It's like that. Just moment by moment by moment. So these things are always here to teach us. They aren't actually poisons. They can be a thing that shows us our bodhicitta. It shows us our heart, our mind, our open mind, and how we can help this world. Thank you for your attention. That's the bulk of my talk. I'd be happy to try to answer any questions.